Welcome back to The Line. The New Mexico legislature convenes next week in Santa Fe. Lawmakers will debate many issues, of course, including spending in the state budget, the Legislative Finance Committee, or the LFC, as we're going to say here. And Governor Martinez have released budget proposals. And Tom, before we get even in what lawmakers and governor want to spend next year, we have to talk about the specter of falling gas and fuel prices here and the ability to spend a dime on anything. Let's open up with that.
Yeah,
What's your thought
absolutely.
there?
Well, you know, when conversations initially started about saying, well, here's what the budgets look like for the, the 2015 legislative session, oil was up north of $80, $90 a barrel. Now, if it's lucky to be just north of $40 a barrel. And that has huge ramifications. I don't know the real ratio or such, but let's face it, $44 a barrel is not good for the New Mexico economy because, and I'm really concerned as a citizen to see how the legislature is going to respond because it's really a flat budget year, but everybody's talking about increases to this, increases to that. Well, something's got to give because the law says you cannot go and beyond your means as far as budgeting goes.
Interesting enough. And the governor, let's go to the governor's proposal. Education is in there certainly. Your sense of it, the numbers look juicy. Like there's a lot of money in there.
It always looks so big.
Right,
it always looks so big around education, yet we always have so much trouble in this state making sure everybody gets a quality education.
That's right.
And I just think it's become a political issue when it should not be a political issue.
Right.
I think that both parties need to really look at and see what they can do in a bipartisan way to improve the schools, not just for our children, but also for the teachers and the parents and the administrators. I think that that's really a huge key. I was talking to Senator Carlos Cisneros last week, who is on LFC, and we were talking about these numbers of oil. I mean, we're talking less than half of what they predicted in October. Okay, so this is not, we predicted it 2 years ago and all of a sudden, this was just a few months ago.
And you, sir, sat right at this table and made these very same predictions many weeks ago when oil prices first started falling. Right, exactly. So here we are.
Yep.
It was $1.63 driving in here to do the show today. It's amazing.
Albuquerque's I heard on the radio that Albuquerque has the lowest gas prices in the entire country.
Yep.
Right.
I mean, it's talking about numbers, in August, the budget people in Santa Fe were expecting a $285 million surplus.
Right.
Last month they were saying $114 million, and that was back when oil was, the price of a gallon of gas was around $2 plus. So, I mean, it's dropping, and it's dropping very fast.
Right. Interestingly, just stay with that a quick second. We'll get to the LFC budget proposal. The going thing back a few months was like, don't worry about it. If it's going to show up in our pocket, it's going to be way down the road. There's a lag time.
There is a 6-month lag time.
But it doesn't seem that way.
Well,
right now, does it?
not with the prices crashing the way they're doing now.
Yeah.
And just to emphasize to the folks out there, roughly 1/3 of the money that the state fund gets is attached to oil and natural gas.
Right.
So this is a big deal.
And jobs, and it goes up. LFC and Governor Martinez are not that far apart on different things and priorities, but again, same question. I just have imaginings in my head already in committee, people saying, well, you know what, we can't do this. Because you saw with the oil and gas thing, it's going to be the default position.
Absolutely.
For everything that comes up. Are you sensing that as well? It's an easy out, for gosh sake.
So, and then it's the same thing that happened last year. I mean, last year they waited until the last week to finalize the budget, and so many items got pushed, got tabled until they had a budget, and then oops, they ran out of time. This year, at least, they have a 60-day session. But I think, it comes down to both sides presented a $141 million increase. So they're actually the same numbers there, but there's differences in the details. In terms of education, the governor's at $68 million increase for education, whereas LFC was at about $71 million. So they're about $3 million apart on that. And then there's other details that they're apart. One thing, though, when you talk about the difference in terms of gas, one of LFC's projections was that for every $1 drop in the price per barrel of oil, it results in a $7.5 million drop in the current general fund revenue.
Wow.
So $1 drop per barrel of oil means $7.5 million drop in the general fund. So, crude math, and pardon the pun there in terms of crude, but basically they projected a lot of this when it came down to $66 a barrel.
Right.
Now they're looking at more like $50 a barrel, So in terms of rough math, that turns into $120 million
Yeah.
less
Yeah.
than they had been looking at when they crafted this budget.
Wow.
So these increases of 141 million, they may already be,
Gone.
just
That's right,
total
exactly right.
hypothetical.
What does this do for the new House members who are the majority? Republicans who have the majority. What a way to come into the majority. They have like no dough to spend, literally. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
welcome to the club. By the way, there's no money to spend. I think there's going to be a very rude awakening, for a lot of folks to say, great, now I finally have a chance to do something. Well, you can.
Right.
You're just going to be really limited as far as budget goes. The other part of this equation, too, is not necessarily how much money is available, but how it's allocated. Is it above the line or below the line? Administration wants to very much control as much as they want to, but the legislature has other things in mind as well.
Sure. Going back to Laura's point, Vicki, about education, the governor also wants a lot of that money to flow through PED, certainly, and I would not surprised by that. But teacher pay is out there again. And talk about a way that will instantly politicize anything. When you talk about what people bring home in their wallets, that's a whole other story altogether.
It is.
Where are we on teacher pay between the two there?
I think that it's just absolutely horrifying that what we pay our teachers is political.
Right.
I think that, I personally know so many teachers, new teachers, who've joined the profession in the last 10 years that have left because it's just not what they thought it was going to be. They wanted to do something. And I think that, Tom's point is right. These new House members coming in with these great ideas, we've got some teachers in that class coming in who want to do the right thing and want to help kids, and I think it's going to be a huge problem because we're not only going to hear that we don't have this $140 million to do all these new things, I think we're going to have to be very cautious of unfunded mandates floating through the legislature, and then these departments get all these new things to do with no new resources.
Not that that's never happened before.
Not that that doesn't happen every single day, but I think it's going to be something to look at and to make sure that, we're going to have a lot of departments just trying to hold on to what they have.
That's right. And Rob, this seems like there's a leadership opportunity here because when you're getting what Tom mentioned about short money, you have to make priorities. You have to make tough decisions. You have to be a leader in the leadership ability to say, no, we're not going to do that. It's a worthy project. I hear you. We can't do it this go around.
Yeah, and covering the legislature going on 5 years now, I mean, you'll get all kinds of political posturing, and that comes with the territory. But when it comes to budgets, actually, the two sides actually pretty much work together.
Gotcha.
And I think that maybe I'm being overly optimistic. I think that the fact that we've got crashing oil prices might be able to give them a little bit more concentration.
As they say, because I can imagine the Senate just stamping a budget out and just say, we're going home. Just figuring it out fairly early. Like, why do we even have to get into the details here? Let's just hold the base and keep moving. But I doubt that's going to happen. I doubt that.
Yeah, that usually doesn't happen.
So what's your sense of leadership in the new majority in the House? What's their angle of attack here with limited funds?
Well, they definitely need to work with the governor. I mean, it seems like that would be a no-brainer to make sure that they're on the same page with her. Now, whether those are,
Is it
there's
about economic
differences.
development purely right now? The governor says it is in her budget.
Absolutely, and I think a big part of about $50 million worth of that new spending is dedicated to the Local Economic Development Act in closing funds.
That's right.
So it's interesting to see what those closing funds would involve. It sounds like they're supposed to be earmarked for out-of-state companies relocating or any relocation. I don't think that it says out-of-state, but I think the way that it's set up, out-of-state companies would be the ones coming here. So it begs the question, what about our small businesses
That's
are
right.
here?
I need some details on that
Yeah.
fund. $50 million is a lot of money to play with. Things can happen. Now, we'll be back in a moment with an insider's view into New Mexico Senate.